Mr Deputy President, one of the exciting and innovative initiatives of the New South Wales Government after the state election last year was the creation of a Minister for Public Spaces. This is the first time that New South Wales has had a Minister for Public Spaces who will identify and protect publicly owned land for use as parks or public spaces. This portfolio is held by Minister Rob Stokes, who is a dedicated champion for public spaces and who oversees the planning portfolio. Mr Stokes is doing a great job to enhance public spaces across the state, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a portfolio for our times. It's as our community rediscovers and reprioritises our open spaces in its many forms, from the traditional suburban parklands, streetscapes and the statewide parkland systems through to what Danish urbanist Jan Gehl refers to as spaces between the buildings. Whether it be in the city, urban, regional or rural areas, quality open spaces matters to us all. Why does it matter? Well, we've never been more appreciative of open space since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've witnessed an explosion of engagement with open spaces with renewed passion and enthusiasm, and I'm seeing that particularly in the Blue Mountains. I've had a passion for creating, expanding and adding quality to our public spaces all my life, long before my career in public office. But I was most proud to apply my passion in this area as a councillor in the City of Sydney for over 12 years. Therefore, I was excited to hear about the competition that the Minister Stokes has announced in conjunction with the Committee for Sydney and their media partner, the Sydney Morning Herald. The Public Spaces Ideas Competition invites industry and the broader community to think about current spaces in need of transformation and put forward ideas on how they can make this happen. From parks and plazas to pop-up installations and redefining resilience, the public can submit their idea on how we can reimagine public space across a range of categories. The Public Spaces Ideas Competition is an exciting opportunity to reimagine and bring awareness to our great public spaces across Greater Sydney and, of course, New South Wales. Danish urbanist Jan Gehl and his seminal works in 2010, Cities Are for People, and way back in 1971, his visionary work, Between Buildings, Public Spaces, has always been the guide to my thinking on reimagined public spaces and parks. I was honoured to meet young Gehl on several occasions when he visited Sydney and found him most inspirational. The City of Sydney commissioned Gehl to do an important study to bring greater human scale and life to our CBD. One of his key recommendations at the time was the pedestrianisation of George Street. That vision seemed way out there for me, even for me at the time, but we're seeing it now wonderfully unfold, complemented by the light rail. I grew up in Western Sydney next to a large irregular block of land called a park, but it was essentially land unsuited to subdivision and left aside by the 1970s developers. At the time, it had an unruly creek running through it that later became an underground piped urban drain running through the park. The nod to the park was the scorching hot slippery dip and a lonely bubbler. In my youth, I reimagined a cycle path through the park and trees and boldly digging up the drain pipes and rediscovering an urban creek below. Interestingly, there are projects in Sydney today digging up such pipes or deconstructing concrete canals built nearly a century ago and creatively reintroducing overland waterways, rock pools, waterfalls and plantings and trees in parklands. My mind keeps thinking of new ways to reimagine public spaces. One thought is to expand upon a US concept where roads around schools for a radius of approximately 1 kilometre are closed where feasible in the mornings and afternoons, and children walk or cycle through the 1 kilometre radius to their school or back to their home. This could be a permanent arrangement allowing local residents to drive in a 10 kilometre in strict shared pedestrian and cycling zones that we see around the city. The resulting closed or pacified residential streets could be redesigned as tree-lined parkways around the schools, new open spaces across our city, suburbs and country towns. The COVID-19 pandemic has reinforced the importance of green space in cities and reimagining public spaces. Sydney-siders' use green spaces has increased dramatically during the coronavirus pandemic. Quality green, open and public spaces are important to everyone. They support our health and well-being, environmental resilience and prosperous local economies. People with access to green and public spaces are healthier and happier than those who don't have access. For many people in New South Wales living without a lush backyard these days, the parks and green spaces in our towns and cities are vital to maintain both their physical and mental health. Mr President, I commend the Premier and Minister Stokes on the initiative to establish a Minister for Public Spaces. Never before in our history has protection, reimagining and expansion of public open spaces been so important than in our current crisis. But the importance of public open spaces is not a new concept. I conclude with the words of Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. I'll give that to Hansard. Quote, "Above all, do not lose your desire to walk in public spaces. Every day I walk myself into a state of well-being and walk away from every illness. I've walked myself into my best thoughts, and I know of no thought so burdensome that no one cannot walk away from it." That philosopher made those timeless observations relating to open space and mental health in the mid-17th century.
Mark Pearson.